Hi, it's Alan, and welcome back to the Library of Alexandria. And today, guys, I'm going to talk to you about Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett. And let me just tell you, this book is really good. This is the first book of Robert Jackson Bennett's that I have read. I was going to read City of Stairs first, but then there were just too many people reading this book, and it came so highly recommended that I just had to check it out. And now I'm a Robert Jackson Bennett fan through and through. So the basic premise of this book, it feels very noir, or at least it just feels really dark. I think that's because most of what's happening takes place kind of at night, and even if it didn't, I pictured it at night. It's one of these places that you feel is always in shadow or always dark. That's just kind of the feel of the main city, which is called Tavan. And so it feels very gritty, very noir-esque. There's 4 merchant houses that kind of live behind their own walls, which is really kind of their own little cities. And outside of the walls are called the commons, and that's where everyone who doesn't work for the merchant houses, aka the poor, they live. The merchant houses have kind of a lock on all of the power and all the cash in Tavan because they are the ones who employ and produce what are called scrivings, or scrived items, or what they call rigs. And so scriving is the main magic system in Foundryside, and to me it's not really like a magic system. It's more tech. This book feels very cyberpunk to me. Scriving is a way, it's kind of like the Matrix, where you alter reality by writing like strings of sigils, or what they call sigillums, which bothers me because I teach Latin, so sigilla just means little. Sigillum is little sigil, and the plural is sigilla, not sigillums, but it's fine. And you inscribe these things, or you scribe these things onto these items, and it changes the reality. It essentially makes the item think. Picture the item having some kind of quasi-sentience. It makes the item think that their reality is different than what the actual reality is. Some examples: these horseless carriages, kind of cars really, they move on their own because the wheels have been scrived to think that the wheels are always on a hill, so they're constantly rolling because even though they're on flat ground, the wheels believe that they're on a hill, so gravity is taking over. And they have mechanisms in the carriage to essentially turn that on and off, kind of like engineering or computer coding, to where you can make something true and something false, or open and close the gate. All of this, that scriving can be done and altered, kind of turning things on, turning things off in that way. There's also a lot of the weapons, scrived weapons, have been scrived to believe that they are higher than they are, that they are falling from a great height, even though they're not. So when they're drawn and thrusted, it kind of activates it, and they think that they've been moving, that their momentum is greater than what the actual momentum of someone swinging it or firing like a crossbow would be. And that's just the basics. The stuff they do with scriving here, guys, it is awesome. This magic system or tech system or whatever it is really freaking cool. And we see a ton of what it can do, and I've barely scratched the surface here. Now, however, you need to be warned that because this is so kind of different and unique, and it's not really something that we can just kind of assume things about, the characters do stop periodically to give each other, really us, scriving lessons. So there's a lot of stuff happens, oh, we have to use a different use of scriving, so we're going to stop and explain how this particular thing is going to work. So there is a lot of that info dumping through kind of teaching of, we have to use this use of scriving now, so let's talk about how this is going to work. And it's very systematic. Plot happens, explanation. New plot happens, using that explanation, new plot, and on and on and on. If info dumps really bother you, there are info dumps in here. I'm hoping that in Shorefall, the second one, there isn't quite as much. It probably doesn't need it because of how much we understand now. Kind of another use for scriving reminds me a lot of the magic in Name of the Wind, the sympathy magic. It's called twinning, where if one thing does something, the other thing does it too. Like, you just have an effect here and it's got scribed the same as the thing that's not near it, and you do something to this, it happens to that. That's a Name of the Wind. So if you're at Name of the Wind, you'll be familiar with at least that kind of scriving. Now, the scriving is merely scratching the surface of what was left behind by the elders. So we've got elders, the elder race or whatever they are. Here they're called the Occidentalists because they had a kingdom out in the West, and they were like, really guys, they talk a lot about the Occidentalists and kind of speculation. I think they're powerful wizard Romans because their names are very Greek Roman-esque. And, they conquered everything and they wanted to subsume things. They tried to give people a chance to be assimilated rather than conquering them. And if they refused, then they wiped them out. It's very Caesar of them. So I just picture them as these towering, like, giant wizard Romans. Who knows if that's what they are. I love trying to figure out what the elder race always was. But I love the aesthetic of this book. I love anything with merchant houses. That's tops in my book. And our main character here is a thief named Sanchia. And it looks like Sancia, which is what I would have said, and I would have kept saying it if they don't actually phonetically pronounce it once in the book. So it is Sanchia. And she is a very, very tolerable thief character. She's not the quipster, so we don't have like 80 QPMs up in here. She is the tortured soul, but it is much less annoying than we usually see this trope. I actually really liked Sanchia, and I actually ended up really liking all of the characters in this book. We've got Sanchia, Gregor, who is essentially the paladin, and Justice, he's that guy, so that's really all you need to know, and yet isn't intolerable. He's a guy seeking redemption, which is much better than just being a fool. He's not a fool, he just is trying to right wrongs. He actually cares about doing the right thing, not because he's an idiot, but because he has seen too much. We've got Orso, who is my favorite, who is a cross between like a cheesed off Doc Brown and Dr. Doofenshmirtz from Phineas and Ferb. It's all I could see. I really like Orso. There's Berenice, who is our really skilled scriber slash computer nerd. If this was a modern book, she'd be the techie, like, hold on, let me hack you into the system. That's Berenice, really. But she's cool, I like her too. And then, of course, we have Clef. I'm not going to say much about Clef, other than he's got powers. So we'll just kind of leave it there, because I don't really want to spoil anything for you.
Editing Alan here, and I realized in my zeal to talk about the characters, after Sanchia, I forgot to tell you what she's doing. Sanchia's our main character because there are a lot of heists in this book, which is one of the reasons I like it so much, because I really like elaborate heists and how they're worked out, with the ragtag teams of people trying to figure it out. At the beginning, Sanchia has been hired to steal some relic of some kind of power, and she's really good. And part of what makes her really good is that she has her own power. If she touches anything with her skin, she can, depending on how long she holds her skin to it, she can tell the objects or whatever it is, recent to like distant past. It's kind of like listening mode in Last of Us, where she can kind of see the outlines of people there and who's come and gone, or one of those games where you ping the radar and it shows like enemies show up on your mini map and stuff, depending on how long she holds it there. But she can't use it forever because it hurts her. So that is why she's an excellent thief, and that is where we start. And after acquiring this object of some kind of power, things kind of go from there. So sorry I didn't actually make clear what this book's about. I talked about the setting and the magic system, which is awesome, and the characters, but I didn't actually get to what the book's about. So back to the video.
Now, each of these characters could be very tropey, and there are parts of them that are, but I think they do rise above the archetypes that they would normally be. I think there's something interesting and unique about each one of them, and I think that kind of summarizes a lot of what I thought about Foundryside. For the first 2/3 of this book, I was like, this is good. This is like a 4.5, maybe 4.75 star book, but it wasn't a 5-star book for me. And part of that is because a lot of the earlier stuff is, there is the info dumping. A lot of it is predictable. We've seen this kind of stuff, like what happens in heists and, people Deus Ex Machina. Oh, we're in a tight spot. Oh, look, glad we suddenly have this thing to draw upon. We we knew where it was going, we knew who the villains were, and there was some snidely whiplash, mustache twirling, puppy kicking villains in this one. And so it was good, and I devoured it, but some of the dialogue felt a little stilted. Some of it even feels slightly YA-ish, and this is not like an indictment. This is just the way I felt. But that last third is such a wild roller coaster ride. I didn't see any of it coming. Stuff stops happening that I can predict. Things get much less mustache twirling and much more kind of difficult to process. And it is just a roller coaster. It is a wild ride. The last third of this book I could not put down. I read almost 200 pages in a day, y'all. It was so good. And I was like, boom, 5-star. It ends on a cliffhanger to where you're like, what? My friends who have read this book, I keep being like, hey, this is this, right? And they won't tell me. But I keep making predictions that I know I'm gonna be right. But I gotta read Shorefall. So that stuff elevates it to the next level for me because I love this aesthetic. There are heists. I love the ragtag group of people each kind of supplying a skill, trying to really right the wrongs. It is a very easy read. It's gritty, but it's not heavy. It doesn't feel like a Malazan or one of those books that's just so depressing and grief-filled because of just this darkness that sits upon it. In fact, a lot of times it felt really whimsical. This is an adventure story. This is kind of like a cyberpunk Indiana Jones, really. That's just kind of the feel that it gave me. It actually felt more like Senlin Ascends, and especially Arm of the Sphinx, the second book. It felt much more like that than something like Game of Thrones or Long Price Quartet or Malazan or something heavy and dark than that. Even though it is a very dark and it's a brutal world that they live in. And so I just got kind of those vibes. It's nothing like Senlin Ascends. The story isn't the same, but it gives that same kind of vibe. People struggling against a system that is determined to keep them down. And just the writing, it's very breezy, very playful, and it's a really, really easy read. And so that appealed to me instantly. Another comparison that came to me was it's kind of like Dickens meets the Avengers. Really, it also has just kind of that feeling of like a comic book movie. It's just non-stop action. That last third, whoa, adventure movie, y'all. So Scriving can do so much that sometimes it feels a little Deus Ex Machina. It feels like magic, really. In that last third, there's a lot of problems that have been problems that people have had for a long time that our heroes come up with a solution for very, very quickly. And so that kind of stretches, credibility. You're like, really? All of a sudden you guys have solved that problem that people have had before? But I don't care. I don't care. Guys, I don't care. I don't care. It's so interesting. What I do love about this book is some of the themes that it does deal with some kind of heavy themes, both subtly and kind of hammer-fisted. This book really talks about, it wants you to examine what does it mean to be free versus what does it mean to be a slave. Beyond, I own a plantation and I own you as a human. It's beyond that. It kind of talks about people as objects, people as tools. Even when, let's say you've escaped actual physical slavery, have you really just stolen yourself away and put yourself into the same kind of slavery you were in, only now it's much more of a metaphorical slavery? Are you really free? And it talks about that a lot with our main characters and even some of the kind of stuff we learn about the Occidentalists and some of their creations and things like that. Are objects meant to serve? Can people become those kind of objects? And at what point? At what point do you really make choices for yourself, or are you being railroaded? Do you really only have the illusion of choice? And I don't know about y'all, I hate the illusion of choice. But when you really examine it, do you have that agency, or does it just appear that you do? And so I really liked Foundryside's exploration of those themes, and I'm not sure we really got to a satisfying answer. I think all of the characters kind of have to answer it for themselves the same way that we do. Now, a couple of things that I didn't love about this book. Tivon feels really isolated. It's only part of a world, but there's no map of the world, and it talks about kind of places abstractly outside of Tivon, but there's no real sense that there's a world outside of this city. It really seems like this city is the only one in the world. It says that they do trade with other cities, but none of them are mentioned. So I don't know where these merchant houses are really trading with and getting all this cash. So it does feel kind of lonely, and that's fine. Tivon's an awesome setting, but in order for a lot of what they're talking about to make sense and really kind of have weight, it needs to be set in a larger world. Just like there's a lot of teaching you about scribing, there are some monologuing villains up in here, y'all. I've never been bothered by monologuing villains. If you are, be warned, there's gonna be some monologuing. I mean, you know, monologuing villains, I'm just like, stop leaving killing people to a third party. Just kill them. Instead of being like, do with them what you will. Just kill them. Like, do it yourself. Take the knife that is in the room and stab them. Stop outsourcing it to a third-party company that's gonna screw it up. There's a lot of that going on in here. It's fine. Still an awesome book. And also, the word scrumming. Y'all better get used to it, because Robert Jackson Bennett has invented a swear word, scrumming, and man, do the scrumming characters say scrumming all scrumming day, y'all. And it didn't really, I actually kind of like that word. It didn't bother me as much as some made up cuss words. Made up swears in books normally really irk me, because it's just like, that sounds ridiculous. What is it, frack? What show is that has frack? Is that Battlestar Galactica that has frack? Annoying. But scrumming didn't really bother me. After like the first couple pages, I'm like, oh, that's what they do. So that's fine. Another one is harpering, which has to do with like this really horrible punishment, being harpered. But that's not as common, so that doesn't bother me nearly as much. But you need to be prepared for everyone to lace their sentences with the word scrumming. You gots to be prepared. There's also a couple things I didn't love happen with each of the characters, like some people getting sidelined or having weird like direction. I'm like, where are you going with this, Bennett? But overall, guys, I can't recommend this book enough, especially if you like action-packed adventure stories. Boom, guys, this has it. A fascinating world with a fascinating magic system. On the Kingpin approval system, this is a superb minus. It's definitely in the superb minus to superb range easily. I love this book. It is so good. I give it 5 out of 5 stars. I will be reading Shorefall as soon as I can find time to fit it on my TBR. Everyone should really read Foundryside. It's an easy read, and it is exciting. I liked this book a lot. So guys, if you've read Foundryside, by all means, let's talk about it, but keep those spoilers behind spoiler tags, because there's a lot of things you can spoil in this book that I know people wouldn't want to know before they read it. And if you've read Shorefall, please don't spoil it for me, even though I may pretend to ask you about things. So guys, that is my Foundryside review. Hopefully you enjoyed it. But as always, thanks for watching, and I'll scrumming see you next time.